Accessing library computer data.
And to make sure that history never forgets the name Enterprise.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Penske Podcast. You haven't tuned in before. This is a podcast where we are running through all 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, giving our thoughts and feelings about each and every one. Right now we're up to episode 12 of season 5. This one is called Violations. It was directed by Robert Weimer. Teleplay goes to Pamela Gray and Jerry Taylor. I'm going to get one of these names right one of these times. Story goes to Sherry Goodhart's T. Michael and Pamela Gray. It aired back on February 3rd, 1992. In this episode, a member of an alien delegation traveling on the USS Enterprise molests members of the crew using telepathy. Tana and Sean are here to talk about this one, so right after this break, me and Tana and Sean are going to go deep on Violations.
Jeff?
I'm sorry. I'm being rude.
No, not at all.
My father finds it amusing to demean me in public. I reached the point where I don't want to hear anymore.
It's not easy having an overbearing parent. Believe me, I know how you feel.
Oh, that's right. You're an empath.
Oh, I can't read Julian's. But I do know a certain Betazoid mother who is a great deal like your father. Deck 8.
Deck 16?
I've learned to remind myself that my mother and I are two separate individuals.
Mm-hmm. And have you enjoyed much success with this approach, Counselor?
No. But I do keep reminding myself. Good night.
Good night, Counselor, and thank you.
Violations. It's going to start a trend of telepathic rape in Star Trek, which is, I guess, what we have to think about this episode for. But, Tan and Sean, how are you both?
Doing good. No complaints.
Good. Yep.
Can't complain. You had to, although I won't say anything yet about this episode. I was trying to think of a way to get into this one, and
I was wondering what you came up with, actually.
Yeah. Well, so
I wanted to know your intro.
Anyone, being telepathically raped recently would be my lead-in. But I mean, it's like, I don't know. I can't imagine this episode of this show, of this podcast, going very long about this episode because I don't really know what there is to talk about with it.
Right.
This is going to be sort of a trend. We're going to be talking about 2 episodes, and we're stuck in a kind of a shallow period of TNG. I was talking a big game about season 5 before we started, and there are really, really great episodes in season 5. It seems to be a little bit back-heavy of a season. The first half has not been great, and this one is kind of fitting the mold. I find this one to be a very middling episode that is saved by one feature, and I don't know what you guys thought about it. Tell me.
Is it saved by Geordi conversationally going on a date with the ship's computer?
No, although that was a good moment. That wasn't it. I'll say I think it was saved by the writing of Jev, the villain, is kind of interesting.
Okay.
And he's sort of believable as to, they do a lot of groundwork explaining why he is this way, I think, between his...
Giving him daddy issues and
he's obviously he has a weird relationship with women. They establish that very believably.
Well, he's the first serial rapist that we've ever had in the universe, in the Star Trek universe, to my knowledge.
They, I think so. I don't think we've dealt with this issue before. What were you going to say?
Interplanetary.
Intergalactic, rapist. But he's, they don't just make him sort of a raving lunatic. Like he's clearly deranged and everything, but there's a sort of grounding to his character that makes it feel somewhat believable.
Yeah, it's a hard show. It blames. It's super problematic. Go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say I wish they made him more compelling and less greasy looking. Like he looks like, at the very beginning, the first scene, you could figure out what he is just by how he looks. Like he's not smooth. He's not suave. He's not hidden at all. He's
And
just
they
gross.
have that. They had all that like evil, sinister music. Like he would have a lingering look, and we're like, oh, well, this is obviously the villain. So they're using sound to set us up as like, oh, he's not just like looking at his parents or at Counselor Troi. It's like he's sinisterly looking, and it's super creepy.
They end the cold open with the typical lingering shot on someone who's up to something and is just like smirking to themselves and by themselves at the bar. That's always a sign of a villain. I thought that the story here is really, really simple. It's almost more like they wanted to do dream flashbacks and they just had to put a shell of a story around it. Apparently I was reading they wrote dream flashbacks for every single cast member.
Really?
And they only chose to use the 3 that they did. So
there's Keiko, and who else did they use?
Keiko's was, I guess Keiko, I mean, they used Troi, Crusher, and Riker are the 3.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Oh, for the comas.
Yeah.
The coma people.
So in the previous episode, Geordi had mentioned about being caught in a fire. That was actually from this episode. They had written that as his storyline, and they used it in another episode.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean,
what was the point? Do you think? Like they got together and they're like, okay, well, time for us to have a dream rape situation on TNG. What went into this? Do you have any insight, Wes?
No, I don't. I would imagine it came about of just from the way that the story comes out. It seems to me like they wanted to do some kind of flashback thing with like a twisted sort of flashback. And then it seems like they realized that this is kind of a form of like mental invasion that would cause this to happen.
Right.
So we'll make this guy be the villain who will show up. And I think ultimately what the problem is, this is like such a simple episode. I almost wish that I don't understand why they didn't make it something of a mystery as to which of the aliens was doing this.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Because
I feel like.
Yeah, go ahead,
Sorry,
Sean.
go ahead.
No, yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that the idea of tackling rape is fine, but if they're not going to do it right, then don't do it at all. And
exactly.
I feel like this show failed. I mean, what they were self-censoring, they were trying to handle the rape act in a very careful manner. Like he's grabbing your shoulder and stuff, and like we know that's not what rape looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we would imagine, but I just feel like either go big or go home, or don't do it at all. And I feel like by hedging their bets, it just didn't work for me at all. And I feel like it's kind of trivializing it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it trivializes all of it. And then at the very end, we've got Data and the security officers breaking in and stopping the actual act of violence between, the guy, the evil alien, and Counselor Troi, which in itself is problematic. And I just, at no point, while I'm watching the episode last night, I thought, oh God, how are we going to talk about this? Because I feel uncomfortable watching it. At no point is there really anything that I'm like, okay, I see what they're trying to do. The show is a dated show. It's an old show, but I'm trying to,
Right.
I won't examine it too closely, but like maybe I can find something here. And I just don't think it gets really anything quite right, except that they've created a completely creepy serial rapist who gets his comeuppance, I suppose, in the end. Geordi and Data get to be clever and, find out the symptoms of, putting someone into a coma after you mentally assault them, and they trace it back and find out that this guy has a pattern. But there wasn't, it didn't have a sort of Law and Order satisfaction, lock up the bad guy thing. And
Right.
it also, and it didn't have the mystery angle that we love so much in Star Trek.
Right.
So
yeah, I feel like if I was gonna redo this episode, and I would try to salvage it, I feel like
I think the idea works on its own face.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean. Now.
Well, if you mentally rape somebody, is that just as bad as physically raping somebody? Like that would be an interesting thing for them to talk about.
Right.
Yep.
And then if they made this more of a trial, like, how do we try this guy? What kind of evidence is there for mental
Yeah.
rape? I mean, I think that's, then you could have Jordy and Data doing their thing, and
Yep.
you wouldn't have to show as much of it, or you would show it once, and, I don't know. I feel like there's a great idea here, but they just totally.
The idea of mentally taking over and that sort of violation could be a very compelling idea, and I think something that could be explored in an interesting way. Wes, your instincts on it were really great. Have it so you don't know who is doing it. Don't set us up with a villain, set us up with a mystery. Is it a microbe? Is it something that these guys brought on board with them, which is, the first half of the episode, they're searching for particles. And there were a couple of really, actually, now that I think about it, fun Star Trek moments, like when Worf says, Klingons do not allow themselves.
Technical difficulties, but we're back, and I caught that one actually this time. So Tana was talking about how, Klingons don't allow themselves to be probed. Sean, you were talking about how it's you could set the episode up as an argument about what's going on here, because I could see a species. I was thinking as I was watching it, all the telepaths that we run into are generally kind of benign. Like the Betazoids are an example. The Vulcans are the other famous telepaths. You'd never seen a weaponized telepath race.
Yeah.
Which seems like it would make sense, and I can understand all of them being that way. And you could craft the episode around the fact of it's not really a prime directive thing, but it's this Federation idea that who are we to judge what people do, basically, is like the sort of flawed ethos of the Star Trek universe, at least at this point in the series.
Right.
And I think you could have built off of that. But as we're saying, the show doesn't make any attempt to turn this into either a mystery or an ethical thing. And I think that the show can't do the ethics because the tone of TNG doesn't allow it to happen. They're not going to be able to get into this. Like you were saying, Sean, go big or go home. They can't really do that here. I think they made a mistake by the ending scene where the guy calls it rape was totally unnecessary. Like, I don't think it makes it more awkward when they just bring out in front of us what's obviously going on, as opposed to just letting us learn it. And it makes it a little bit weirder or a little bit more awkward at that point.
Yeah. I have to say this was, if not my least favorite, like this is not an episode I would ever watch again. Like, it was uncomfortable to watch all the way through, and there were lighthearted moments. The one I was mentioning at the very beginning with Geordi, he sits down and he's like talking with the computer, but he has this conversational tone where he's like, well, let's scan for the nilazine. And, a routine scan will scan for something. He's like, well, this isn't a routine scan, so scan for the nilazine. There are no traces of nilazine. How did I know you were going to say that? Like,
I love it when they work with the computer. Yeah.
They don't say that to a computer, and it's so perfectly Geordi. And then he's telling Data or somebody about it later, and he's like, well, I just had a cozy little chat with the computer. You're supposed to be trying to get to the bottom of this mystery, and instead he's like leaning seductively, or like he's got to sort of like, well, what about this computer?
It's a staple of Star Trek to have them getting upset with the computer when they're not giving it the information that it needs.
Yeah, when you're saying things like you're in full sentences instead of scan for this, measure that, do this, instead of speaking in commands and in an analytic way, they're like, well, computer, let's see what we can see about, all these microbes.
Well, me and Clay were talking about which is more powerful, actually, the data or the computer, but that's another podcast. I did want to... Both of you are saying that this is a misuse of the issue.
Yeah.
I disagree, and I don't know if you're saying this out of. I'm gonna go. Just do you like what's wrong with how they handle this? Outside of there's kind of a media thing. There's like a knee-jerk reaction that nobody ever gets rape, right? Like it's just. Everyone's always unhappy with rape used in a storyline. Like Game of Thrones always gets criticism about like why did they use rape here? I've never seen anyone write a piece that says this was an appropriate use of rape in a story, which there has to be that case. Like I don't find the story here to be that odd because it fits into TNG's mold, and it's not like they're making excuses for this guy.
Right. But so I think Tana should answer this first in long form, but I was just going to say one thing. But I think that she made a great point when she mentioned Law and Order,
Sure.
because that's a contemporary show that addresses rape, and I think that does handle rape as well as you can expect
And
on TV. And
yeah,
that
and
what
it's
sci-fi
nuanced.
does
It's not
rape,
always the same. There's all SVU and there's 1,000 different variables. So they're coming at it again and again and again every week and sort
right?
of rehashing this. There's no way we're going to be able to do any justice to it.
Right.
Um,
But
But when
my question
sci-fi
is,
does,
yeah, my
I
question
was
is,
gonna,
what's getting it right? How do you get it right?
Well, one of the ways in which I think they get it wrong, one of the glaring things that really that I think that they miss an opportunity on is making Counselor Troi completely and utterly powerless. She can't fight back, even though she's Beta Z. There should be, to my mind, some way for her to attack her attacker, to invade his mind, to get to the truth of who is actually hurting her. And instead, she's passive the entire time. And that's deeply problematic for me. Also, at the end, the resolution, such as it is her in the process of physically being assaulted, no longer just mentally being assaulted, but physically being assaulted by this guy. And the thing that saves her isn't her ability to fight him or to fight him off or to advocate for herself or to protect herself or any of those things. It's that the other men on the ship, the Data and Geordi, figured it out, and Worf shows up and like slaps this guy in the face, knocks him out, and like she gets saved by the heroes in the end. And I think that that's a really dangerous thing.
Yeah.
I think if they only changed that one thing, if they kept the story like it was, but Deanna Troi had agency, she had the ability to use her half Beta Z mind abilities to go to find out something through him, like fight him in the astral plane or something, or advocate for herself that way, it would have made a big difference. Instead,
Right.
I'm forced to watch her be attacked and be powerless throughout the entire show, all the way to the end. And also true of like Beverly and the other people that get attacked, but mostly with Deanna Troi. I mean, that's our
Well, is
main
this
focus.
I was thinking, is this even a Troi episode? I think she just has the most stuff happen to her, and it's not particularly a Troi episode, which is kind of weird to say. But
Yeah.
it should be.
it
'Cause
should
her
be.
sto-
I think
her-
that
her-
you're right, Tanner, about that. It
She
should be her
carries
story.
it. She carries it. And I think because she's the only non-human that's attacked and she's a telepath, I would want for that character to have some way of fighting back that is superhuman, or that she's closer to these guys, right? Like they're a different style of empath or whatever they are, but she should be able to do something about it. And at no point is she able to do anything about what's being forced on her, what's happening to her. And
Right.
she's completely at the mercy of others and is waiting, and is ultimately saved by others. And I think that that's a real missed opportunity for TNG to really. She would have come out of it being a much stronger character. I think they always swing and miss with Deanna.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love the idea of her investigating the
Mhm.
particles with Data. Like, what if he was the one that was her advocate, but he even had a hard time understanding, like, well,
Yep.
it didn't really happen to you. It's just in your head. And she explains to him that's just as bad. She gets
Yep.
really passionate, and like even Data could learn a lesson while they investigate
Right.
together.
But
Like, there's so
Right.
many
Yeah,
different
yeah.
ways to do this that would have, I think, paid off a lot better. And like
Yeah.
Tana said, at the end, like, I was glad that Troi did get a few kicks in, but I
Yep.
would have, I mean, for Worf to come in and just slap the guy down, like,
And
see
that
how
was-
easy it is for a man.
How funny was
like,
his
God
slap?
damn.
Like,
It was a pathetic. I at least needed him to like tackle the guy or something. Like
Yeah.
I didn't need him just to punch the guy in the face. But I actually thought
Yeah.
that the Troi fight back was probably the best fight scene the show has ever done. Just her, like the couple of blows that she lands against the guy are actually like pretty hard hitting as opposed to the usual stupid stuff that goes on, like which is
Right.
basically the Worf punch. I think I'm of two
What do you think about her using her own telepathy, her own empathic ability to fight back, or to be able to maybe suss out who is really doing this? Like maybe something
Yeah.
doesn't feel right to her about the explanation when he tries to pin it on his dad, and she like something about it is wrong, and she recognizes that. Even something like that would have gone a long way for me. But
I
instead, she swallows the truth whole, or the lie that they give her, and invite her attacker into her room. And it's just there. She should know. It seems to me that she could have been treated in a more. That character could have been more, not heroic, but like a stronger character. Like she could have, fought back.
I totally agree with what you're saying, that as we were making the joke, I'm going to take the joke credit for here. The Skype is being violating of our podcast today, so I apologize for all these abrupt edits, but we're going to try to get back to what we were talking about. I was just going to say that Troi. The problem here is that I agree with you guys about the Troi's lack of agency is really probably a driving problem with this episode.
Yeah.
I disagree that because she's not really a telepath, so I don't know how she can fight back particularly well. They can that's kind of a stupid nerdy character beat thing, but I do think that she should have been the main detective here, just as she is the only one on the crew who can really relate to what this race is all about.
Right.
And it's also a little bit unclear. The telepathic abilities of the aliens is kind of not fleshed out well either, because it seems like their race isn't telepathic naturally. It seems the guy has a line like they have to learn how to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not like they're a OP telepath race that are coming in and just fucking shit up. So it's kind of weird that they have such abilities as they do, which is another whole problem. I think that, just to wrap up what I'm thinking, I'm torn between this TNG show has a kind of tone that it has to stick to, and I think that tone is much better if Troi wins out in the end. That's a flaw of the show's structure more than anything. It's not a flaw that she needs to win. That's like that's how this show chooses to tell its stories, or it should choose to tell its stories.
Yep.
It's kind of a very happy, sort of bland, unemotional type thing. No actions really have any repercussions that matter. Type stuff, which is maybe why this topic is problematic for it.
Right.
At the same time, I think the show gets the topic of rape correct to how it interprets topics. But the Troi thing is less that they got the rape topic wrong and more that they fucked up how they were supposed to tell the story about it. Does that make sense?
That it should have been more of a TNG style mystery and not a villain doing a bad thing getting reprimanded.
Yes, basically, yeah. It would have been more satisfying to me if that had happened.
Yeah. I have a question for you guys.
Shoot.
Do you think that when rape happens in sci-fi or fantasy, it's harder to handle than it is in like a contemporary genre? Like, for example, in Game of Thrones, so rape in Law and Order is horrible, but at least it's supposed to be the real world, and you don't have to look at laser guns and swords and stuff while this stuff's happening.
It's not a symbol for anything.
Yeah, it's tricky to handle these topics with sci-fi and fantasy, I feel. And I'm just saying that because one of you mentioned Game of Thrones and how it handles rape, and it's something to consider. What do you guys think?
I think it's all in how you handle it. I don't think it's genre specific. I don't think that, necessarily a Law and Order show is better or worse than a Next Generation show in its handling of rape, or a Game of Thrones show in its handling of rape. I think it comes down to the choices that the creative team makes and how well it's written, honestly.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's different from murder, right? Because murder narratively is all about it's mostly about the mystery of the murder, where rape is really sort of about the outcome as opposed to the narrative that you can build around solving the murder. Solving a rape is not really a story, if that makes sense. You can't really, there's nothing you can build around it in terms of, like, the answer is sort of clear in rape, you know what I mean? Where as opposed to murder, you can set up the story. It's like, oh, I found a dead body. Like, how did this happen? They try to do that here by having the comatose thing, which is stupid, that no one just remembers what actually happened to them. So they kind of add a murder storyline on top of a rape story, which is, in my opinion, Game of Thrones does rape better because the outcomes are more important than the act is, if that makes sense.
I don't really watch the Game of Thrones show, but I do read the books. And I think, some of the blowback from what I understand, two characters have a scene where one rapes the other. And in the book, it happens in the book. And so people were saying, oh, but this happens. This is, from the source material. You can't get mad at us. And really, in the source material, you get a look inside each character's head and you know what led up to that. And the circumstances were vastly different in the book than they were in the show. And I think, we are walking on rotten ice right now, guys. This is a fraught topic, my friends.
I disagree. I don't.
You don't?
No, I don't really like. I think people have a knee-jerk scaredness to it, which makes it makes sense, but it's not. No one here is pro rape, so I don't understand if anyone has any kind of problem with things that we're saying. It's like, I don't know. I kind of disagree. I mean, the Game of Thrones thing, it's a weird argument to me because it gives George R.R. Martin some kind of weird power thing where he's getting it right, as opposed to the show, which is strange to me. I don't understand why the author, if the author writes it a certain way, that's more acceptable or less acceptable to do in a TV show that way.
There's also a lot of 13 and 12 and 13-year-old girls are getting married off and, in the actual book. So it's not just rape. He's doing that thing where it's really questionable across the board, but it's based in historical practices and precedents.
Not even historical, really. At this point, there are certain segments that still. You're saying
it's still happening.
Yeah, it still happens.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of things that are, I think, touchy or complicated, and that he addresses. And I think I don't know.
No, I guess I'm. Yeah, I guess it always comes down to me as to. Especially in terms of this TNG thing, the hardest I can damn this episode is that it's kind of boring. I don't think it
doesn't read as super creepy to you. You don't find it hard to watch because it's so creepy.
Well,
I think I find it repulsive. It's not just a bad episode that does nothing. It gets it wrong and it goes in that direction more than I want it to.
Yep. Yeah,
it's hard. I want to give it a negative one.
I need you guys to clarify. Besides the Troi thing, is there any other thing that you see as?
I think it's all of it, Wes. There's a lot of things about.
What was that? That was the weirdest noise ever.
Was it?
It sounded like someone hit an empty keg of beer or something. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
your microphone's picking up everything, Tana.
Wow.
No, it's that.
Did I tap the empty beer keg in my office?
It sounded like you kicked it with your steel-toed shoe or something.
Wow.
It was quite impressive. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What were you saying?
I have no idea what I was saying.
I know. Well, of course, they're steel-toed shoes. Why did you say it that way? Why can't they just be regular shoes?
Because it sounded like steel hitting.
It's this sort of thing, this kind of conversation that's so dismissive, right? Rape is very serious, and there's no way for us to unpack it. And the tacit approval, or there's a tacit approval about rape built into the foundation of this TNG episode that's so big and encompasses so many other things than TNG that there's no possible way the three of us are going to be able to parse that in this.
Well, how does the show approve it? I want to be very clear about what I'm arguing here. The show in no way is approving rape.
Right.
So I don't think it's not true to say that there's a tacit approval of rape in this. The show is going out of its way, not out of its way. It's clear.
No, the treatment of the serial intergalactic rapist who has done this on many other worlds and gotten away with it is cast in an almost sympathetic light because he had struggles with his father, and because Deanna Troi was so kind to him that somehow makes it okay, or makes his this evil character sympathetic to the viewer. It's being presented to us in a way that isn't deplorable or like stomach turning. I think it was turning my stomach, but not for the reasons that the show was giving me, because they cast this guy as a villain, less of a villain and more of like, I don't know, like a sad son or a
Right.
misunderstood, but
Right.
like why his finishing line is, why did you have to be so kind? He
Right.
shouldn't be able to have a finishing line that shames Deanna Troi. And he's been doing this with impunity across the galaxy, across many other planets, and all he
Yeah.
gets is carted away. With the Enterprise team, like this is it. It's a tacit approval because that reaction is so pale compared to what those acts deserve to be treated
Right.
with.
Yeah, I needed more severity in the reaction of.
Yeah.
I wanted Worf to want to murder him, or I wanted
Yep.
Deanna to want to murder
Yeah.
him. I
Yeah.
needed, and instead, like they play him as kind of
Yeah.
a handicapped, mentally handicapped, slightly autistic type of character who doesn't
Yeah.
know that he's doing is wrong, and it makes it less severe.
Yeah.
And
And in
yeah,
our
I
world,
just.
yeah, in our world right now, we have a lot of these kinds of behaviors that are being justified by guys. Like, if you don't love me, or if I don't get the girl that I want, then I'm entitled to do to her whatever I want, or I'm entitled to stalk her, harass her, harangue her, get out of the friend zone. Like, there's so many deeply rooted things in our society today that are super fucked up, and so that's what I'm trying to address when I say that the show is sort of tacitly approving this
Mhm.
behavior. He's punished, but nowhere near with the severity that he should be. And at the end, Deanna Troi like feels empathy, or like, he gets in a final one-liner for her, and it's just stomach turningly mishandled, I thought.
Yeah. How would you define tacit approval versus regular approval, Tana? I agree with what you're saying. I just want to be clear.
Just that it's passive, that it's
Right.
that the way that they treat this guy, like with humanity and dignity, and that they cast him in this sympathetic light. I think all of those things are working. They're not saying, the show is not claiming that what he's doing is okay, right? But
Right.
the way that they treat him,
Right.
like the kind way that they treat him, and the lack of repercussions are tacit, to my mind, or tacitly
Right.
approving, or like when you don't speak out against it, what is it?
Yeah.
Silence is consent. Like, there's, you're not doing violence to someone, but if you don't speak up about violence being done to other people, then
Mhm.
you are part of the problem. It's that
Right.
idea that by
I,
not,
I,
yeah,
yeah, I know. I totally understand. I think maybe the misunderstanding was when Wes says this show is not condoning rape. Of course not. But that's the
right,
difference. The show isn't approving of rape. It's tacitly approving, and there's a difference
yes,
when you use that word, because
yeah,
by being passive, in a way, it's giving it a pass, or
yeah.
by not being severe in its repercussions, it trivializes the rape.
Yeah, and yeah, just sort of, and it's one thing after another in the show, allowing this guy free reign. When they decide it's the dad and the son is sort of let off scot-free, he makes his way to Counselor Troy's room. Like, he gets full run of the ship. There are things that happen in the show
Well,
that are stomach turning.
he's not guilty at that point. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
I,
and so
I'm,
they're saying that you can do this sort of thing with impunity.
I
And it's
mean,
not
there's
until he
I
takes it a step too far that anything at all happens.
do you think narratives are
Yeah,
obligated to be morally correct?
absolutely not. No, absolutely not. But I want them to do it right. If you're going to talk about this, then I want to have a more satisfying outcome. It's what I was saying earlier with like having Deanna have some sort of agency, whatever that form would be, to, have stronger repercussions for this guy, to have the mom and dad maybe less two-dimensional,
Mhm.
make the relationship between the dad and the son more complicated. But these are things that I don't think TNG is ever gonna be able to do, or wasn't able to do in the time span that it had. But I
Right.
think it could have made a few choices differently that would have made the episode a bit better, a bit different.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the narrative does it's for Star Trek, the narrative does have to be morally correct in the end because Star Trek is a moral show. It cloaks
Yeah.
itself in morality, and at the end of most episodes, justice is served, the bad guys are caught, Data learns a lesson, whatever it is, like it's morally based. So for it to be like, all right, another episode, well done, everyone on the ship back to work, it's like, no, you all failed. You got
Yeah.
partially of the way there, but you all need to reassess how you just handle this whole thing because you're a moral show. You hold yourself to moral standards, and you did not follow through.
Well, yeah. Okay. I mean,
but in Game of Thrones, it's not a moral show. So to speak to what you were talking about, like I don't think narratives always have to be morally correct. I just think that Star Trek kind of designed itself that way.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I totally agree. I mean, in my eyes, this episode ends as Star Trek.
You know what it is, Wes? I think it waters down the severity of rape. I think the biggest glaring error that the show makes by even approaching the topic is that the overall treatment of this whole scenario, of this whole episode, leaves it very watered down. The violent scenes are just sort of like wrestling and, or he's like holding Deanna down on the ground. You have the spilling of the coins, this stuff like they can't do that stuff, I think, in a way on that show that doesn't dismiss or downplay the severity of sexual violence.
Well, I think that's sorry to interrupt, but this is I feel that this episode is being sort of picked on. Not that this is an incorrect criticism, but it's more like the show just can't handle repercussions. It's just the nature of it. Like, Picard has killed 11,000 people. His direct actions caused that. Mm-hmm. And we just, the next episode is everyone's like, well, fuck it. Like we just got to get up and got to get on. I understand the criticism.
Yeah.
It's a problem to me just because the show isn't designed to handle it. And I think that the show's inability to have a foundation that allows for continued deeper discussions is a problem with it, but I don't think they fuck up this topic as badly as I think they fuck up the topic we're going to talk about in the Masterpiece Society, which is interesting to me. Like, I understand that, like, they're not downplaying rape or sexual violence or anything. They do a terrible job with the narrative itself, just because Troi gets put in the back seat. That was a bad phrase, but because Troi gets put, Troi gets knocked out of the spotlight that she should be in for it, and it's kind of disappointing at that point. But I mean, it's just the show just doesn't do anything for me. And I'm not arguing that this is even a good episode of TNG because I don't think it is. I don't think it's bad. It's kind of just there. It's kind of just a dull thing. But we've done 40 minutes on this. I don't want to take up you guys' whole afternoon. So let's.
I knew, when you said, "Oh, we'll be done with this one soon," I'm like, "Nope." I knew this was gonna happen.
I should go in and edit myself. I should always hedge that by saying this. You can either talk for 5 minutes or you talk for an hour about it. But anyway, thank you guys.
Well, I've had. I'm sorry. I've actually talked to Tana a lot about this stuff, and I know her feelings about this, so I kind of knew where she would be headed, and it was hard for me to understand her point of view on a lot of rape culture when I first met her, and I've come around a lot to sort of seeing more eye to eye with her. Like, I probably don't agree with her on everything, but everything she said, I totally agree with.
A lot of people. I'm not the spokesperson for what's acceptable and what isn't in the world. But I think that this is a very serious thing, and I think so. To jump to the part where we where we review it, when we give it the score, I'm gonna go with a -1. I wish that this episode had never been made. I would rather it doesn't exist.
You jumped the shark. We're gonna come not jump the shark. I don't know what phrase I'm trying to say. We're gonna come back in a couple seconds after I play this audio clip. Me, Tana, and Sean are gonna give our final thoughts about Violations.
Hello, Jeff.
We'll be reaching Starbase soon. I wanted to say goodbye and to apologize again for my father.
There's no need. You're not responsible for what he did.
Before all this happened, I had hoped we might become friends.
We still can.
After what he's put you through, maybe you can forget. I'm not sure I can. You were so lovely. I have to go. Goodbye.
Jeff, you're upset. Would you like to talk?
No.
You'd feel better if you did.
Why do you have to be so nice? So lovely.
Hey gang, good lively discussion, and Skype continues to record, so maybe it's past its phase of that too. But Tana, lead us off with your score. You hinted at what you were going to give it.
I'm gonna go with a -1 and say that I wish this episode didn't exist. Not only would I never watch it again, I was very uncomfortable while I watched the whole thing, but I think that their treatment of it, though not overtly rage worthy, it adds to the normalization of rape and rape culture that I find very pervasive in our society. And I think that if things like this that sort of water down the sexual violence and the repercussions of this kind of act, of the acts of serial rapists, I wish it didn't exist. I'll never watch it again, and I wish that they hadn't made it.
Sean?
I'm going to go 1 or 0, whatever the lowest is. I think this episode proves that Star Trek cannot go everywhere. If it's not willing to go big or go home, it shouldn't do it at all. And by halfwaying it, it does a disservice to the topic, which is obviously very important to a lot of people, maybe more so now than ever. And you hope that sci-fi will try this again and be better and better at it as time goes on. It's interesting if you keep it as a reference for what not to do, then there's some validity there. But yeah, I don't know. I was uncomfortable when I was watching with my wife because I'm like, oh man, I don't even want to know what she's about to say for the next scene because I can already hear it coming. And she's right.
Yeah.
And I think that she would probably agree with Tana on a lot of these things too.
I'm going to give it a 5. No, it's a this is the finest example of rape media that we've ever had. I'm going to give it a 3. It's like a super weak 3 to me. It's a story that's hanging together by threads, and it seems like it's built around an idea that the flashback sequences aren't even all that interesting to me. They're shot in maybe Clay would know this, but maybe you guys would actually know. They're shot in it reminds me of some kind of horror thing. Right. It's sort of
they are.
It's like a slow frame rate or something's going on that's very weird. The one I enjoyed the most was seeing Patrick Stewart in a hairpiece. We
didn't even get to that.
There was nothing to talk about, but no. I wish there was a story that used that better. I disagree about the villain assessment just because I think that for how little time they had, they actually drew a pretty nuanced villain here who's not evil just for the sake of being evil, but is, criminals come from places. And the show does a very good job of explaining how this guy has become such a damaged psyche. Not to justify what he does, but it explains in only a couple lines of dialogue where he's coming from. When a lot of TNG episodes are, this is just a bad dude, he's going to do some bad things. So I think there's a little bit of nuance there. Other than that, it's really just not, it's a kind of a clunker of an episode.
But so to give it credit for it does a good job building this guy, that's like saying, great job building that car that doesn't perform well on a shitty track with a bunch of bad drivers. It's hard to give it any credit at all if it doesn't even make it to the race, I don't know. I think we're splitting hairs at a certain point here, though.
Yeah, but it would be like if you got a shitty car and then in a couple lines of dialogue, you explain the entire backstory to me about why this car is now shitty. Okay, scripting wise, I guess I can see your point. Yeah.
But they don't really do that, Wes. This is part of the tacit approval. So not everybody that has an overbearing dad is going to become a mental rapist, a serial rapist, because dad was always hard on you and makes fun of you in front of strangers. Like a lot of people, that's their reality, and they don't become serial rapists that invade the mental and physical space of other people, doing them harm.
Right.
And I think by casting him in that light, exactly what you're saying, that it's okay and understandable that he went this route and turned to sexual violence and mental violence against people that were kind to him or whatever, or just like, I think that that's really the secret danger here, is that it normalizes that kind of thinking that oh, because his dad was mean to him in front of strangers, he gets to grow up and do this other stuff, and that's kind of okay.
No. No one's saying that he's allowed to do it. I'm saying that his behavior is coming from a believable place. Everyone who gets molested as a child does not turn into a child molester. There is a correlation between the two. You know what I mean?
See, this is what I'm saying. Like, we can't, there's no way for us to have this conversation in a small scale. And I think this is why, for me, I wish the episode didn't exist. I don't think it has a place in the Star Trek universe. And I think it could have a place. I think if they made different choices with the way they handled Deanna and the way the crew, like the resolution, and the other characters interacted with our villain once, he gets found out. Like, if you're gonna do it, like Sean said, do it right. Do it, go big. And I think that there's room for it in this universe, but not in this way.
Thank you very much. Damn it, Sean. I was going to go with such a dramatic exit. No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was going to say, Deanna goes through this again in the movie Star Trek Nemesis.
On a lower scale, I think, in kind of a pointlessly lower way.
Right,
if
but
that makes sense.
the topic happens again. So
yes,
maybe we can't quite agree on all the points right now. Why don't we shelve it, and then we'll think about what we've all been saying, and then we'll do a review of the movie later on.
Yeah, we'll all watch Nemesis and then reevaluate.
I can
learn some lessons. Maybe they did.
I'd be down with that. So in 2 years, when I get to Nemesis, everyone will look forward to see how our views have changed. We're going to post this on the Reddit Change My View and see what happens. Guys, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your opinions about this episode.
Thanks for having us, Wes.
Absolutely. We're going to be back in a couple days with the Masterpiece Society, which might be an inverse of what we just did here, where I'm going to rage against the Masterpiece Society. Thank you guys for listening. If you're on YouTube, like and comments, appreciate it. If you're on iTunes, rating and review helps get the show out there. I don't have any new reviews. I can't read those. So listen to the past episode where I read a couple with Clay. Sean and Tana and me going to be back